In today's linear economy, natural resources are extracted to create products, and products are disposed when they're no longer useful. Such model is costly, not only in terms of economic value, it also imposes great loss to the environment. In recent years, the circular economy has gained increasing prominence as a solution to some of the world's most pressing cross-cutting sustainable development challenges. The reuse, repair, reproduce model provides much promise to accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is well established, geospatial and Earth observation data are powerful tools in measuring, monitoring and reporting of the SDGs. For circular economy, supply chain transparency and traceability, waste reduction, product lifetime extension, recycling campaigns and maximizing the use of underused assets will be key to a successful transition. Geospatial and location data are the underpinning of these practices. In the next 2 days, industry experts, policymakers and innovators will share ideas and explore the opportunities further. Welcome to the Symposium on SDG and Circular Economy.
Welcome to all of you in the last day of the conference. The first session of the day focuses on circular agriculture, rethinking agriculture value chains to prevent food loss. For this session, I would like to welcome Mark Noort, Director, HCP International, as the moderator.
Welcome to this session. Let me first tell you who I am. I'm Mark Noort. I'm a consultant on topics related to geodata and applications in agriculture, water, and climate. To give some examples, I'm involved in a project in Africa on agricultural monitoring related to climate change. I'm involved in another project in Africa that develops new sensors and services derived from that in weather, water and climate. And I'm also involved in a project in Australia on water productivity and saving water resources. Apart from that, I advise different governments and the European Commission on innovation related to geodata, and lately I also work on geodata for inclusive finance, because banks and financial institutions are getting more and more interested in that. So that is a bit my background. On the session, I was thinking circular for agriculture. I do not know whether we will achieve circular, but more sustainable and adapting to climate change is certainly a topic of interest today, and also in the case of developing countries, increasing the production and productivity. So there is definitely a connection with SDGs. We will have 5 speakers today, and we join the technology showcase session with the speakers we have. So that means that we have about 10-12 minutes for each speaker, and then some time for questions. I will do some time management, which means that when you get all warmed up and keep talking, I will give you a 2-minute warning. And well, when you then still keep talking, then we will have to take more drastic measures. But well, the range of speakers is very interesting today, because we start with media and communication, and then we go to agricultural topics, and we end with urbanization, which is a good link with the next session, which will be more on cadastre and urban issues. So I would like to invite Alex Cabaret. He's from Devex, and he will talk more about media and communication aspects. And I think that is a very important topic, because we, coming from the technical side, It is often we want to dive into the technical issues and we have to convince others that we are doing a good thing. So there, the media and communication aspects come in very handy. But of course, your topic will be more broader than that. Please, Alex, take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And yeah, I was afraid I had to talk about technology at start, and I was like, and I was really frightened. It's like I'm going to talk about technology in front of experts, and so I decided to speak about storytelling and the convening power of media. And I'll start with a story and tell you what Devex is. So Devex is a media platform, and I'll share more information about what we do. I've been there 10 years. I started in 2000 as a data aggregation platform. So the idea was that in the development sector, donor agencies, development banks. So there is this story where the World Bank was trying to build an airport in Bamako and they could not find anyone to build it. And at the same time, you had these construction companies who were looking for contracts in Africa and they did not know the World Bank wanted to build an airport. And so at this time, the World Bank was still sending their terms of references, invites to tender by fax to the few organizations they knew. So that was the idea behind Devex when it started as a student project. So it started as a social enterprise, mission-driven, to try to help improve the sustainable development industry. And they decided to just go to public sources of information, funding data, and aggregate it into a single platform. So it was back in 2000. And now we have about 1 million users, 1,500 corporate organizations that are subscribed to Devex. And we grew from a data aggregation platform to a storytelling platform, a media platform where people from that industry connect to find funding and understand what's happening in this space and try to really build this community to improve through storytelling. So 20 years later, we now have reporters and journalists across the globe working on development stories. And the reason why I'm here today is that we did a whole series of articles on land tenure about 8 years ago, it was. And little we knew, but the European Parliament was using it to inform a new legislation they were doing and to fund land registrations programs in West Africa in partnership with the Food and Agriculture Organization. And then we realized that the story that we were telling was important for policymakers and decision makers and the businesses who were working behind it. So a little bit about Devex. So we started in 2000, as I said. We work mostly on those SDG related issues, and we provide funding intelligence and a lot of journalism information, and then we work on storytelling issues. So why have I been invited to the food session? Is because how many of you are familiar with the Food Systems Summit that took place this year? So 1, 2. So basically, there was the big convening of the UN this year. So they find different topics every year. For 2022, one of the big summits of the UN would be oceans. And this year you had biodiversity and future of food systems. And for food systems, basically the world were coming together to try to find a way forward to transform food systems more sustainably and think about circular economy and improve food systems as a whole, from nutrition to land adaptation, climate change adaptation, mitigation, and so on. So this is just some examples of who is in our audience. And today I wanted to speak very briefly about, because I guess I have 10 minutes, right? Very briefly about why storytelling is important in that space or in every space. So, and what we've seen when we've been producing these content series that we do. So content series mean a lot of articles, storytelling, interviews with experts, influencers who can relate information to their communities, to their information, and through videos or articles or reports or whatever might be. So one thing it does is behavior change, accelerate adoption, and replicate solutions. So we've seen that a lot when we speak a lot about this issue of land tenure or land grabs. The more the media speaks about it, the more governments will change their policies and businesses will find ways to offer their solutions. And so that's something that happens through storytelling, often in media or lobbying, but storytelling is still very much important. Connect with new partners and scale as well by telling your stories. Clients or policymakers or decision makers will understand how you can bring a solution to them and solve issues. So policy change, that was the example I shared earlier with the European Commission, who had decided to take this issue of land ownership, land tenure in Africa seriously, as a lot of people do not have any land certificates, so they cannot get loans or they cannot justify that they own the land to just invest in it, to farm it sustainably. And storytelling as a way to communicate impact and build trust. And then it's very important when you work with storytelling platforms or partners to make sure that you're working with the right platform that has the audience you're trying to reach and producing content that is speaking to the audience that you're trying to influence positively, ideally, right? So I mentioned the Food Systems Summit. So I don't know if you guys looked into that, but maybe you want to look into it for those who have food systems related applications. And I'm just clicking here on this Food Systems Summit. So it took place at the UN General Assembly back in September. And basically governments, the 193 member states of the UN came up with these 5 action tracks. They had more than 1,000 meetings throughout the year between civil society, businesses, governments to come up with policy recommendation against 5 action tracks. So action track 1, ensure access, safe nutrition, nutritious food for all. Shift to sustainable consumption patterns, that talks about obviously circular economy, boost nature positive production, livelihoods, and resilience, so climate adaptation, in this case, climate change adaptation. So I think this is important for those of you who work in that sector to understand what are the policy recommendations that came out of it. As one of the biggest issues we've seen, and I've lost my presentation now, so let me try to go back to it, is accountability. So one issue is that they always make these promises, policy changes, regulations that we're trying to do, but they don't have a good way to track it. And I think that's where your community of data scientists, geospatial technology can help provide solution about how transformation of food systems can change. So a lot of commitments have been made to change food systems in a more sustainable way by 2030. But there is not necessarily the tools available to track those changes. So yeah, we did this series on food systems to try to do storytelling around that and create a platform for organizations who want to talk about food systems at Devex. So we've involved people from business, so the head of Chobani, Paul Polman, who's the head of Unilever, and this lady, she was the chair of the Food Systems Summit. She's also the head of AGRA, which is the African Green Revolution Association or something like that. But so it's important to look into that, I think, to understand what are the possible use of your applications, you know that, but who are the possible buyers or I would say allies to get your products to the organizations who need it. Talking about circular economy, you have this foundation based in the UK, Eleanor Crook Foundation. They put all the funding behind that, behind research about circular economy in the food system. So if you want to dig further into that topic, you can look at what they do or look at the stories that we're writing every day. So Food systems, yeah, I just talked about that. So we all agree food systems must be overhauled. How do we do it? And yeah, so that's about the storytelling here. This is the first project I was mentioning that we did on land issues. Here, looking at how land tenure, land ownership, land registration affects different sectors or different issues: food security, gender equality, women's empowerment, environment, economic development, and conflict resolution. So there's lots of applications, lots of use cases for governments and societies. So and then we worked on lots of other topics, like this thing on gender data that we did with UN Women to try to get those stories out, understand how data can be used to change the policy making and development programming, development funding programming. So again, that's gender data, something we hear a lot about, but the UN has built this database basically where they were aggregating gender disaggregated data from a number of their partners, but then nobody was using the platform. So they basically came to us and asked us to tell stories with the data and to drive more traffic towards that platform. And so then we hosted a number of events, and we ended up having about 10,000 organizations coming to these webinars. And I was very surprised because I thought it would be very niche. And you actually have a lot of organizations across sectors who are interested in using or improving their gender data practice or using it for policy making. So yeah, hence the importance of trying to convene those communities. So these are some of the organizations who we've worked with over the years, and we've worked on these two big projects funded by the UK Space Agency and Inmarsat, talking about how to leverage geospatial technology for sustainable development, specifically in the small island developing states. And then yeah, we've had a lot of these programs. So happy to share those with you if you're interested. And yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thanks. Yeah. Questions?
I've worked with Devex many times. I'm in the U.S. Cadasta Foundation. And I was, as far as the geospatial aspect of it, does Devex have a strategy with regard to that in terms of your overall coverage? And please forgive me if I missed that.
No, as I was saying, we have some projects that we've worked on. So we basically have, the way it works is that we have a news team with reporters and journalists who have editorial priorities. Some focus on food systems, others on global health and or climate change or different issues. And then we have a team that produces these types of series. So that comes from external funding. So these are kind of sponsored storytelling platforms that we build. So this one was funded by UN Women with Gates funding, basically. This one we had a number of partners, USAID, the Morning Stage of Tech, Thomson Reuters, to talk about land tenure. And then the one on food systems, it was these partners, BioVision Foundation, WWF, USAID, World Vision, IFAD, and others. So when it comes to geospatial technology, we've had partners who came to us so we can do more storytelling on that issue. And so we are producing stories on that. And so we have a reporter who focuses on tech and development. So she writes a lot about, Catherine, yeah, she writes a lot about that, but that's not her unique gig. So when we want to do more and we want to do a deep dive on a specific issue, we'd get, I can't see that video. We get to work with partners who want to push that. So we did a whole series with Inmarsat on the use of satellite tech for sustainable development. So looking at sustainable fisheries, how the applications work. We did stories with farmers, with fishers in Indonesia, for instance. And more recently, we worked with this common sensing program, which is funded by the UK Space Agency, to look at climate change adaptation in small island developing states. So we can do these deep dives then that last for, let's say, a year or 2 years, where we do storytelling at least once a month, a story per month or a story per week, and then some events here and there. Yeah.
So yeah, good morning, and thanks Mark for the intro, and thanks Alex for introducing the topic of storytelling around UN SDGs. I have also some examples in my presentation today, so excited that we're all talking about the same topic and how storytelling can help engage the audience to help reach the UN Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Peter. I'm the co-founder and managing director for Orbicare Europe. And a little bit about Orbicare Europe, just to introduce us and our team. We are established since 2017. We have offices in Christchurch, New Zealand, and in Berlin, Germany. And from those offices, we're doing a lot of geospatial analysis and development projects. In particular, we focus on two technology areas in geospatial and how we can extract value from geospatial data for the use in sustainable development. On the left side, we have the Insights engine. So the Insights engine is where we're combining data, artificial intelligence technologies, and geospatial analysis to provide better insights for our customers. And the other part is where we're providing location data and combining that with organizational data and building applications. And one of those use cases is storytelling, like we've just heard in the topic before. So how do we use these technologies to contribute towards sustainability and the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Today, I just want to present to you three real-world use cases where we've used location data technology to help reach the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and I wanted to just jump straight into those use cases. So the first use case is increasing finance for rainforest restoration. And so the image that you see in the picture there is a drone footage, thanks Mark, of a project that we've been undertaking in Indonesian Borneo. And what you see here is a canal running through a deforested area of the Borneo rainforest. The reason why there's a canal running through is because that's draining the peat rainforest. The idea was a 1990s project, the Great Rice Project, where they drained the rainforest in order to claim that land for agricultural purposes. But since then, a failed project. The idea of a bunch of organizations was to come together, claim that land back and reforest that land. And what we did was we worked with one of those organizations, and we wanted to help them build a platform where they could increase their donations so that they could reforest faster and stronger. So we worked with maybe I give you a little bit of the motivation why they would want to build a platform to do that, to increase donations. One of the key motivations that an NGO such as this has is that donations are very seasonal. So this is the graph. If you look at this graph on the left side is the December donations, and these far outstrip the entire rest of the year. Which is a problem when you're undertaking a project involving reforestation, where you want to have a consistent source of funds that you can distribute to the areas that you're reforesting. So the concept that we came up with was a new type of donations portal that was focused around stories, telling stories around the project, engaging the user better, and using interactive maps and drone footage to help engage with the users to come back, revisit, and consistently donate to this area. And what I wanted to do, I have some static screenshots here, but I wanted to actually just give you a demonstration. So hopefully I can jump into the live website that I've preloaded here. So this is the landing page of the portal. It's all in German at the moment because we're working with the German chapter of this particular NGO. The NGO behind Lebenswald in German means living forest. The NGO is the Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation, and their mission is to enhance the habitat, the livable habitat of the orangutan species in Borneo. So the main feature of this donations portal is the map. And the idea here is that the user can get an idea of the area. So if you just zoom out, I can... of the overall area. And then they can decide whether or not they would like to donate. But then they can also personalize those donations, and they can, for example, each of these individual cells they can select. They click on a cell, they can select these cells, and they can start to reforest their own area. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to encourage in a way that the user could really interact with the reforestation area. We also wanted to promote transparency. So these cells are only being reforested one time, and they are then sort of owned by a particular user. But we also wanted to promote recurring donations. So with this type of portal, we can update the drone footage, we can update lots of news stories. There's a lot of geospatial storytelling that's going on in the background of this platform as well. And so that we can get users to revisit the site and continue to donate and promote that to further users. So the site was launched now approximately 1 year ago, and the result is that the donations for this particular initiative have more than doubled. And you can see this area here covers around 150 hectares. So feel free to visit that site. We're currently in the second phase of development, so we'll be releasing an English version for the international audience later this year or early next year. So we're looking at empowering coffee farmers in this particular area of Ethiopia. And smallholder farmers represent the majority of farmers still worldwide. There's over 500 million smallholder farmers in the world, and there's many in Ethiopia, and we worked with an organization that have some initiatives. In this particular one, they were training 50,000 smallholder coffee farmers for better agronomic practices in order to increase their household income. So the average household income for a smallholder coffee farmer in Ethiopia, just to put it into context, is around $500 per annum. And the idea is that by providing better training to these coffee farmers, they would then be able to increase that income. I don't have a demonstration, but I will go through the results of this project, what we did. And what we did was we worked with the organization and implementation partners on the ground to provide them field collection, field capture tools, and then an entire monitoring system and reporting system for this initiative, so that they could then take those insights that they received from their initiatives to better increase and reach more coffee farmers and measure the impact of their initiative. The third one I want to go through is a pure storytelling platform. It's a visualization platform around for a large German agriculture technology company. And their communications department wanted to better communicate and provide more transparency around how they are reaching the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And if I jump into the second demonstration. So where we saw where they were previously using PDF reports and basic reporting on their website, they wanted a way to normalize that data so that they could tell better stories in a more structured way to the audience and have better engagement and more partners, engaging with more partners to help them reach more and more smallholder farmers throughout the world. And so they did this through this platform called Farming Stories. And the idea was to really focus around the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and to be able to tell stories around each particular goal and how they're reaching those goals. So if you, for example, Filter by Zero Hunger, there's a lot of projects in this area, and then you can just jump into a particular country and you can look at one particular project that they might be doing in that area, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, their particular results that they've done, and then how they're meeting the UN SDGs. So those are the 3 use cases that I wanted to come up with, that I wanted to present to you today around using geospatial to reach the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And yeah, looking forward to engaging with you further. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. And also, timekeeping is really good today. Well, questions? Yes, please. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, really interesting, Peter. Thank you. The technology you're using, is that your own or is it commercial off the shelf?
Yeah, we still remain pretty technology agnostic. So we normally just pick the best modern tools to fit the use case. And so a lot of it's open source technology and some of it we've also developed ourselves.
Okay, thank you. And in the final example you showed of the storytelling, what was who are you intending to reach with that medium?
Yeah, so the organization we worked with there, BASF, they've got a number of different stakeholders. So they have their customers, the businesses that they work with. They've got their investors, their investor relations teams. But maybe I go back to this website quickly. One of the key things that they're doing when they work in these particular countries is that they always partner with other NGO organizations. And they want to find more partners. And I think that this was something that Alex also brought up, is actually how do they connect with those partners? And this was a way that they could promote what they're doing and then have some outreach towards more potential partners. Yeah.
So going to your first use case, which is fascinating, thinking about sponsor a title and, land title type thing. Mm-hmm. But from an implementation perspective, I don't know if you can speak to this, but how does an organization manage literally that that location in a forest in terms of implementation around, it kind of reminds me of this child sponsorship model where, you're actually contributing into a pool to support a region, but yet, here's the child and family you're sponsoring kind of thing. I mean, it's the same kind of, but how does that work on the implementation side?
Yeah. Maybe I jump back into that particular portal. Sorry. Yeah, so you're right. The way that they're doing it is that you can choose a very specific area to sponsor. But when I first came up with or presented the motivation, it was around, you might remember the seasonality of donations. And there's also the seasonality of reforestation. And so with this particular platform, the organizations are actually able to forecast much better how many donations they've got, and then they're able to reforest those areas that they've forecasted for. And as you see in this particular footage, there's a very wide area of reforestation that's due to be reforested, but we've only opened up particular areas for cells. So we have some algorithms that try to drive users to particular cell areas and do cluster around those areas. So
What's the UX then on that? Like, are they
Mhm.
What is the cut? What is the what information does the donor get? From the user experience in terms of your plots are being, like, are
Yeah.
they? Yeah, how does that work?
yeah, so there's a login here. I don't have my login details here, but what you can do is the user can log in, or they can also enter their code, and then they see their areas that they've donated. So if they've done, if they have a recurring donation, they see that grow on a monthly basis, and then they see things like, for example, their number of trees they've planted, the total square meter that they've planted, and also the CO2 that has been captured from that replanting.
Managing that on the implementation side, I'm still like, we can talk after.
Sure, yeah.
Another question? One, if not...
There is one question from our online
Okay. yeah,
participant.
Okay.
So Alina would like to ask, for the coffee farmers case, do you use drone to capture the data?
For the yes, there is some data that's captured by drones, but we're not doing, us as an organization are not currently doing too much remote sensing in those for that particular project. We're more doing the ground truthing from the field captured data. But it's a really good potential use case, because a lot of the impact that the coffee farmer training can be for sure monitored from Earth observation data. So we're looking at how we can better implement that in the future.
Tim, you are right. Please. No.
With the stakeholder engagement we do, it's completely different. It's around development projects. One of the concerns as we move to more digital engagement is that older people won't be able to engage in the same way. With charities getting a lot of donations from older people in their wills, and with like really large sum amounts, do you think these platforms could reach them, or have you tried to go down any imaginative routes like memorials as a forest section, that kind of thing?
Yeah, and that's really cool that you said that. So this area, you see that, maybe if I zoom out, you can see that there's already a reforested area here. And this was exactly that use case. So this was a large donor that I think it's around 70 hectares that they've donated in their will to this particular area. And this is actually, I think, has just happened again. My colleague Will, they've just taken another large donation from this, right?
Basically, like doing it through the portal is not the only way to get on the map. You can also you can also reach out to the organization, and then they would love to put you on the map in a bulk donation like that. And our client told us a story of one time they received a suitcase of actual gold that was like an anonymous donation towards this project. So it does happen, and of course including not so technical people is a consideration. But we're also wanting to push the forefront as well.
Yeah. One particular thing with the older audience, and you're right that maybe they're less technical than us younger audience, but actually some of their strongest and most engaged users are the older audience. And there's a retired lady who would basically send, who was one of their largest donations. She would know everything that's happening. Whenever there's new cells created, she would always be telling stories. She's one of the biggest promoters to this particular website. And for these larger donations, I just wanted to mention as well, it's very tedious to draw something like this whale by just clicking on cells. And so the idea is that as a service, when there is a larger donation that's coming in, the foundation will actually draw a logo or some particular thing on the map to make that organization stand out.
Okay. Great, thanks. We now move to Lino Oliveira from Instec in Portugal. He will talk about geodata and viticulture, which is a real topic of interest now in all grape growing areas across the world. Please, Lino, go ahead.
Okay. So thank you, Mark. Thank you all. I'm Lino Oliveira. I'm a senior researcher at Inestec. I'm also the coordinator of the Geospatial Information Systems Engineering area at Inestec. Inestec is a private non-profit R&D institution. We are around 1,000 collaborators, and we are divided in several research centers, from information systems to robotics, telecommunications, power systems. We usually make this interface between universities and industry. I'm here today talking about a project Infravini. It was the development of a thematic spatial data infrastructure for vineyard climate change management. This is the agenda that I prepared for this presentation. I will talk you about the rationale, the architecture of the SDI, talk about the case study that we implement, and do some final remarks. So, what was our problem? Well, adapting to climate change is one of the biggest challenges for the wine sector. The adaptation strategies and policies must deal with potential impacts, both short and at long term. And the context-specific adaptations are essential, of course, to decision making. Our motivation. Well, our motivation was intended to develop an instrument capable of supporting wine growers to become more resilient to climate change. We know that each wine region has unique contexts. Essential to identify and prioritize climate change adaptation initiatives is very, very important. And of course, the quality and updating of information available is a major factor for one that is doing the decision making. So an opportunity arises to us to do a creation of a thematic spatial data infrastructure for supporting vineyard climate change management. This allows to gather and make available relevant geospatial data on climate change, include climate and agronomic indicators, allowing the analysis and normalization of local sensory and forecast climate information. We also intend to provide an observatory that monitors both the impacts of meteorological variability and the impact of climate change. We do these two things. So about the spatial data infrastructure, the big picture. Well, we started with we called the SDI engine. That's where we have the main components and the users, the metadata, the local databases, and of course the main applications. But we added some new modules to support these new initiatives that we pretend. One of them was the observations model. This observations model enables us to collect the data from the sensor network in real time, so the sensors that were put in the field. And we also added forecasts, a climate forecasts module. These two combined, we could then organize and put information in an observatory that monitor both the impact of the meteorological variability and the impact of the climate change. So about the case study. Well, the case study was done in Douro wine region in the northern Portugal, classified as UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's well known. It's the limited region more ancient in the world. And for this use case, this implementation that we did, this infrastructure, this API, it uses and provides interoperable thematic information from different sources. You can see in the bottom, we interact and interoperate information with key actors in the regions, for instance, municipalities or other entities that create information that could be relevant to this infrastructure. Also, we interact with actors outside the region, in Portugal, or even an example is we also integrate Copernicus in information. And this infrastructure also interacts with public entities that usually are in a higher level, regional level, national level, as the example that I put here today. One important issue is that all this interaction of data is used adopting standards, OGC standards. So the information, we don't have a copy of the information. The information stays where it's produced and where it is maintained. So we just access this information and we give the use and we combine it, but we don't make any copies of the information because, as you know, for the first second that I copy the information, that information is outdated because it will be continually updated on the source. Here we have some illustrations of the interface that gives us access to this kind of information that I was talking about. Well, another set of data, of course, is the information that we collect continuously from the wine growing area, and this is obtained through the soil moisture probes, the sensors, the weather stations that are placed on the ground. And once more, all the access of this information is done through the use of standards. In this case, particularly, Sensor Things standard is an OGC standard for IoT. This is a snapshot of a weather station that we collect data in real time. So enables us to present this time series and to do an observation in real time what's happening in the field. Of course, one thing is the weather and the meteorological data. The other one is the climate information. So for that, we did some work and we gathered spatial-based climate information, both historical climate, So we worked in getting information of the past data of historical climate, and then we also did projections for future climate for the next 50 years. So we have a pretty good time frame and the tendency that the climate could engage. And once more, we have here an example of the information that was produced. Also using the information was produced in a standard way, standard files that allow us to use that information, but also to put available to other entities or other users through our catalog application. So Infobini provides a platform and provides an understanding of contextual factors in their interaction with the regional climate. This is key to identify and prioritize the climate change adaptations initiatives. So because we have to be very careful about the actions that we want to put ongoing. This enables us, for instance, to create a set of indicators such as climate indicators, agronomic indicators that are really valuable to viticultors because they can now have a more clearly image of what is the process going, what is the tendency of the climate, and then they can take actions and be aware of the problems that they may encounter in the future or near future. So some final notes. Well, this project aims to contribute to making the European wine industry more resilient to climate change, help minimizing costs and risks through improved management and monitoring of production, because this is, at the end, this is always the problem, because if the region doesn't produce wine, it will be a problem for the viticulturs, for the economy. It's not just the problem of the grape, it's a big problem. So this is an important contribution that we intend to give to this sector. Besides in ESCTEC, there were other 3 partners involved, each one with these particulars and specialties. We had a university of UTAD, it's a university in Vila-Real. Vila-Real is a city in the Douro region, so they are the climate experts, and they work in the field of climate change and their implication with the viticulture. We also have vineyard producers association that they are testing these results, and they are giving us some guidelines through the analysis and the consequences of climate change on viticulture. And we also have a private company that help us build the solution also, and because we intend that this solution goes to use not just in the region but in other regions, we have to prepare a structure that enables us to go to other regions and other territories. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm open for some questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thanks. Questions?
Are you speaking to any growers or regions that have been able to produce wine because of climate change, like England?
This is when we started this project almost 2 years ago in the region of Douro. This is a problem that they are experienced for some time. So they at the beginning, wine growers look at this climate or these hot waves or the heavy rain. They look at punctual or not really events that occur every time, but they started to be aware of the problems that they have with these kind of events, and do not be able to predict the occurrence of these events. Usually when a drastic event of heavy rain or really hot waves can put in risk the entire grape harvest. So they started to be more aware. So our goal with this project is to, it's not, of course, we are not solving the climate change problem, of course, but we intend to give some help, some tool to help the viticultors to be more aware. About doing this in other regions, yes, it's a challenge, and I think the results that we are getting with these projects will enable this tool to be ready and to be available to other locations.
Other questions? Yes.
Are you integrating drone remote sensing at all?
With this project particularly, we are not doing that, but our purpose and the company purpose that acquire a drone recently is to integrate NDVI imaging and do some coverage of the drone and collect that data and integrate it also in the platform. But we are doing this not just collecting data and then going to think what we are going to do with the data. We are working in the indicator side. So we are working with some experts, the viticultors, to understand what are the indicators, what are the answers they want to be answered, and then we go back and we go find the data or the information that we need. But that's always a path, because nowadays drone can collect a lot of data in real short time. So it's a path that we are in filling out on our near roadmap.
It's a nice project. I know there's a lot with irrigation and pesticide and herbicide and tracking and metrics that go into it too.
That is not particularly in this project, but of course climate change gives some impact on that kind of applying some pesticides, applying some the irrigation, if we have to irrigate or not. That's also a big issue in this sector. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Quick question. Yeah, the last one. Yeah. Please.
Yeah, I had a small question for vineyards, of a high value crop. We see that within the industry, in the vineyard industry, a lot of hyperspectral imaging is used, also for indeed pesticides and it's an expensive technology. Do you think for your project that would bring significant add value, or is it something you're considering?
Okay, that's a very good question, because that kind of analysis it's more closely with precision agriculture. That's one other path that we at IneshTech are also doing it with another center, the robotics, and we are investing a lot of developing low-cost robots to do some tasks in the vineyards. One is to analyze the grape with sensors and to be aware of the state of maturity of the grape. The other one is to apply the treatments, but very carefully. So we also developed a robot to go through the vineyards and to make precision spraying on the grapes, because also you have the issues about not spraying everything, even in areas we don't have grapes. For other hands, they are more concerned each day with the applying of treatments. So we are engaging in a process of not applying treatments to have everything natural. So that's an important issue. About the costs, as I said, we are looking to create this kind of tools, low-cost tools, because in this sector, the agriculture sector, not just the vineyard, the agricultors are a little sensitive to spend a lot of money, and if they don't see the results, that it's very difficult to convince them that they will be having some benefits. So we are betting more in this kind of solutions.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Lino.
Thank you very much. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Let's have
That
the
just
online.
came.
Yeah.
So I think it's Elena asking, do you partner with businesses that produce seeds to share your insight on the future climate so the seeds could be adapted to these future conditions?
Okay. In this project, we don't have this concern, but we have other projects that we are working with the national institute that does the research on this area, and that manage the seeds. It's not seeds laboratory; it's a seeds store. That's kind of the one that we've got in, I think, in Finland. This is seed bank, right? And we have other projects, and where we are helping them to take more information and to adapt these seeds to also not just to climate change, but to the environmental issues also. Okay, thank you very much.
The next speaker is Tim Buckley of Alsys. He will talk about charcoal, trees, and SDGs.
Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Tim Buckley. I work for a UK-based company called Alsys, and as I say, I'm going to cover a talk on charcoal trees and SDGs. So in terms of the presentation today, I'll give you a quick introduction to my company, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation around satellite imagery and technology, and also covering those topics that you see there. So Alsys is a geographic information services company. We've been around since 2004, and we focus on working in what we call fragile and conflict-affected states. These are countries that have been through some kind of crisis, either man-made or naturally occurring. And we use our technology, excuse me, those three technologies around the side there to gather data to bring insight into these areas. So Earth observation can show us what's happening in these places. Geographic information can show us where and when these things are happening. And it's really important that we get the field work. We get people on the ground collecting data that really helps us understand why these things are happening. And then we bring it all together through a combination of methodologies and platforms to deliver that insight to our clients, and we provide that real depth of vision. So in terms of the SDGs, we've heard a lot about how we can monitor them, and I've got some examples of interesting ways that we've been applying these technologies to some particular problems in places where it's often hard to gather data. So the first one I want to talk about is 9.1.1. This is population in proximity to all-weather roads. Now you'll understand that in a country like Afghanistan, it's been through maybe 4 to 5 decades of conflict. And when you have conflict, people move. I think the UN estimated that around about 2 million people were displaced outside the country. You also get displacement inside the country. And if you consider that the last time a census was performed in the country was in the 1970s, and since then population estimates have always been sort of extrapolated from that 1970s baseline, layer on that movement of people, and you're going to end up with data that's pretty out of date and pretty unrepresentative. So we undertook a project. We recruited about 15 local guys who had an interest in technology and GIS. We trained them in how to use ArcGIS, how to use satellite imagery, and we then set about digitizing 4.4 million compounds across the country. And that gave us this really accurate picture. And then when you've got that accurate population data, you can then do something with it. And this is just one of those examples where we're looking at where the people are in relation to the roads. Another example from some work in Syria, quite a simple example. I'm sure you're all very familiar, or we've all used the lights at night data. But this was really looking at how power supply and access to electricity was gradually being degraded over time during that conflict. And you can see the little insets there are showing Aleppo in 2012, 2014, 2016, and the gradual sort of reduction of power and electricity in that city. And this is quite an interesting one. It really came from a project we were working on around counter-narcotics. But we started to see these solar panels that you can see in the top right-hand picture there. And associated with the solar panels, there'd be these reservoirs. And so we started to dig into it with our local surveyors. And that picture on the left-hand side is the main bazaar in Lashkargah in Helmand province. And all of those items that are stacked up are solar panels and the associated equipment for dropping boreholes. And what we could see from the satellite imagery was this sort of movement of people from the main traditional farming areas out into the desert. And they typically move out there. They'd sink a borehole into the aquifer, buy a diesel generator and a pump, and start pumping water up to irrigate their land. There's a range of issues associated with that. To actually get the land, they'd have to pay a warlord. There's no land tenure. There's the high input costs of putting a borehole down, paying for diesel constantly to get the water out to irrigate your crops. And when you've got those high overhead costs as a farmer, you need to balance that. And if you're an Afghan farmer, chances are you might end up growing poppy, which then gets turned into opium and feeds the drugs trade. So there's a lot of interesting issues related to this. And what we saw in about 2015 was these solar panels appearing, and that followed a large increase in the number of people moving out and out into the desert. And so the solar technology allowed the farmers to move away from diesel, to reduce those input costs. So they were therefore not needing to grow the poppy. And they were able to irrigate their crops effectively for free. So we saw this adoption on a huge scale. I've got a little video that takes you through. So that's you're looking at a compound in Afghanistan there. And then as we start to zoom out, you can see the reservoirs being picked up in the satellite imagery. And you see, he's doing it, his neighbors are doing it, the whole community is doing it. And as we zoom further and further out, it's actually the whole valley. And all of these, you can see the distribution of the points there is all sitting outside that traditionally irrigated agricultural land. So this is all new land that's come under agriculture, all powered by renewable technology. Quite an interesting, a little interesting example, I think. And you can see the uptake there. The graph, we only mapped as far as 2018. We did do it again recently for 2019. We're now up at 80,000 of these reservoirs across that area of southwest Afghanistan. You need to think about the consequences of this. Obviously, there's a slightly positive angle to it. There's a reduction in opium cultivation in these areas. There's an adoption of a green technology. But the flip side is what's happening to the water that's coming out of the aquifers. The volume that's being abstracted is phenomenal. And so the rate of that they're having to drill deeper and deeper to access the water is accelerating. And this is a basin, a catchment area that feeds on down to Iran. So you're now starting to get a competition over water. And again, the potential for conflict is high. I like this because I enjoy geography and cartography. It's a GIF of that adoption of solar technology and the associated NDVI values. So the dark purples are where NDVI value is increasing, and you've got a lot of solar panels. The sort of the pinker areas, the dark pink areas, are just the traditional areas. Lots of high NDVI, but no solar panels. Okay. So moving on to trees and forests then, and an SDG goal 15. I think we all, it's been covered enough, we all get it. Forests are a really important global asset for those reasons that are laid out there. Natural disaster risk reduction through reduction of landslides and flooding, carbon sequestration, the balance of the atmosphere with the carbon dioxide and the oxygen and humidity, and also protection of our watersheds, where 75% of our fresh water comes from. And this example really came to us by chance. Somebody in the company, in their part-time role, works for a charity that works in northern Uganda, close to the border with South Sudan. And she was getting reports from the people she works with in the villages there that they were starting to see a lot of their forests were getting cut down and turned into charcoal. And these were people coming up from the city and sort of pillaging the local habitat. And so we did a little look online, and you can see there are a few articles on this, and it's referred to as either black gold or black diamonds. And the rush to extract value from these forests is massive. And clearly, this issue cuts across a whole load of related areas. There's obviously the environmental impact. Clearly, cutting down the trees in these areas is going to have a big impact on the environment. There's the economic impact. The people in the villages and the rural areas, they're also growing fruits. Fruit trees are now getting cut down to turn into charcoal because the value to a charcoal trader is so high. And so sources of income for the rural population are being decreased, along with food security. There's a social aspect. Things like the shea tree has more than just an economic value to these communities. There's also a cultural and sort of semi-religious aspect to it. So that's getting impacted. Infrastructure issues. The roads up in these areas are designed for bicycles and foot traffic mainly. Big trucks are now coming in and driving out, loaded up with tons of charcoal. Obviously, the sustainability, a tree that's taken several decades to grow, getting cut down, getting turned into charcoal in a very short space of time. There's no planning around where these are taken from. It's not regulated, and there's no plan to reintroduce trees back into these areas. And it's driving an urban and rural disparity. 80% of the people in the rural communities use firewood, 80% in the urban areas use charcoal. And there you see, I think this sort of really illustrates the sort of the scale and the volume of how the different communities manage this commodity. In the villages, that is your unit of measure, what you can carry on your head from the bush back to your home. That's your supply of fuel. In the urban areas, clearly these big trucks are coming in, extracting the charcoal and taking it back to the city. So again, I've got a little video. So we knew about the problem, what we wanted to do. Oh, okay, I'll start playing the video. Sorry, I'll try and talk over it. But this is about how we then quantified this problem. Using satellite imagery and machine learning, you can see these charcoal burn areas have a quite obvious visual signature. So we trained up we used a data scientist in the company to produce some training data, and then we ran it against one district. And this is just one district up in the north of the country. And that's about 100 kilometers. So it's a reasonable size, but it is going on a scale that is significant. And what we hadn't seen was anybody actually sort of visualizing it like that. And I think when you visualize it like that, we all get it. We see pictures, and I think as geographers, we have a responsibility to get that knowledge across to the people who are making decisions in the most effective way, and pictures are a way of doing that. Okay, that's a map. It's not one of ours, but I think it's pretty cool. It's just showing the value chain from the production areas up in the north. $10 a sack of charcoal. Get into the cities, it's tripled in value. It's $30. I mean, it's a good business to be in if that's your thing. Yeah, it cuts across many of the SDGs and relates to them. And I guess so. My closing thoughts then. I haven't got answers. I'm a geographer, not a policymaker. But as Robert Cardillo said on day one in his keynote, I think what we can use, geographic data, Earth observation, it enables us to shine a light into these dark areas, and particularly in the environments we focus on working on. Often that's the only source of data, the only source of reliable data that you can get your hands on. So we can use it to highlight these issues and put it in front of people who can then make the decisions. Also, I think Geo has a role to play around regulation. There's an ability to license this and control and manage the trade, potentially around enforcement, and potentially around the optimization of clean energy sources in years to come. So, sorry it went a bit quick at the end. I hope I'm still in time, and I'll happily take questions if there are any.
Questions, let's start here. Will, yeah.
I found it interesting about the Afghani farmers changing to solar energy.
Yeah.
What motivates them to change their crop from poppies after that? Because if it's making them the most money and they're doing it for less, why would you change?
That's a very good question. The dynamics of poppy cultivation are quite complex. You've got the cultural aspect of it. In Islamic law, it's haram to grow narcotics, but you can as a farmer, you can offset that slightly by the need to feed your family. So there are many balances. Also, there are risks associated with growing opium poppy. The Taliban are now in charge, so we wait to see what the crop will do. They'll just be planting now for harvest April 2022, and we'll wait to see how that plays out. Under the Taliban in '99, there was a massive drop in opium production. They banned it, and they enforced that ban in a very rigorous way. It's pretty bad for your health if you were caught growing poppy. And like any drugs trade, it's massively complex. And that ban, some would say, actually pushed the price up, and then the following year there was a big bounce back. It's complex. So what motivates the farmer? It is about money. He is balancing a whole load of competing agendas. There are other good crops that you can grow in Afghanistan. That Helmand Valley, Kandahar, places like that, really productive agriculture. So high-value crops like grapes, particularly, pomegranate. There's a range of other crops that are capable of being grown, that are legal, open, and offer income opportunity.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Yes, please.
for the Uganda charcoal use case or example, where is that information being digested or taken up at the national level? Like what sort of, who's a consumer for that, and what are some of the actions, if any, that have been taken on the basis of that? Because that's so alarming, and I'm sitting here thinking land tenure, titling. We're doing customary land right now in Uganda with customary certificates in rural areas. So I'm looking at that and I'm going, oh, you know, there's something, we got to do something.
Yeah, well, we did that because someone in the company runs the charity there. That was off our own back. There's no client for that. What we need to do is find someone to take this to. I think we've done something that's pretty impressive in terms of quantifying the scale in one district. You know, our next plan is to scale it up across the whole of the north. Lamwo, Lamwo. Yeah, it's right up on the border there with South Sudan. So it's quite a, well, it's not kinetic anymore, but it's quite a sort of a porous sort of region. So yeah, what we want to do is find the right person to take this to and say, you know, here we've actually got some real evidence now, other than just the hearsay of the villagers, who were saying, you know, this is happening, and it is, you know, I said showed in those articles, it is being reported on, but I don't think anyone's done it like that in a way that really sort of captures it in a visual way. Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy to.
There's an online question.
Yes, Elena is asking, with regards to the solar panels in Afghanistan, Tim, do you think there will also be an issue in the future with these panels in the end of their life? How could this be anticipated or monitored in the future?
Yeah, so that's interesting question. What happens at the end of the life? I mean, the reason they are being adopted in the numbers they're being adopted is because they're cheap. They're coming in from China, and you know, it makes economic sense for the farmer to do that. Absolutely, their sort of maintenance, their lifespan, I would suggest would be quite short. I mean, it's a pretty arduous environment out there. What happens afterwards? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's something that that could be considered. Maybe that, I can't give a sort of a more than a flippant answer on that, I'm afraid. So, one to consider.
Okay. Yes, please.
Just a quick question on the Uganda use case. Maybe I missed that, but what kind of images did you use? Did you manage to use free images like Sentinel, or wasn't it not enough precise and you had to buy some higher resolution images?
No, that's brilliant. I didn't mention that, and I'd meant to. So we've done a fair bit of machine learning for computer vision using really high-res satellite imagery. We look for refugee camps and these kind of things, and been successful. But the overhead cost of buying the imagery is quite high. The guy who did that piece of work was just working off the free Esri base maps. So there was no barrier to entry, which was, you know, from our point of view, brilliant, and we've got it at scale.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers.
The last three questions.
As long as I get another round of applause.
That question just made me wonder how big each of those burning pits is.
For the charcoal?
Yeah.
You saw it in the video. They're probably, sort of like 2 meters round. They chop a load of trees down, pile it up into a pyre, cover that with earth, and then torch it. So obviously to make charcoal, you have to burn wood in an absence of oxygen, and that's what makes charcoal. They're quite big.
Thanks.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Tim. Now we go to the last speaker, Andy Wilson of the Ordnance Survey, talking about urbanization in Zambia. Please, Andy, go ahead. Thanks.
My name's Andy Wilson. I'm from Ordnance Survey, the British National Mapping Agency. My role there is I'm our Region Director for Africa. And this morning, I'm going to talk about one of the other, I guess, big challenges that we're seeing across the world right now, which is urbanization and this mass movement of people from rural areas into the urban centres. and a piece of work we did in Africa, down in Zambia, to try and address some of those challenges faced by the city of Lusaka. So I'm sure you're aware of some of these statistics, but I don't need to remind you that we're seeing huge movement of people into the urban areas. I think in Africa it's estimated that 54% of the urban population now live informally, in informal settlements. So it's not just a challenge of growing urbanization centres, it's a challenge of the informal nature of how those centres are growing without the proper public infrastructure, the sanitation, the health facilities that are required to support those populations as they grow. And of course, 65% of the SDGs are linked to territorial urbanisation in some form or manner. So this is an important dimension that we must address, and I think geography can play a huge role in this challenge and understanding how we manage these challenges going forward. It's also been recognised by the Commonwealth, and in fact, it's estimated of the projected 2.5 billion population growth, 50% of that growth is going to be in Commonwealth countries. So at the Commonwealth, the forthcoming Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali next year, this has now been formally recognised as a call to action. So supported by the Commonwealth General Secretary and the Rwandan government, who's now the host of the Commonwealth, there will be a formal call for Commonwealth countries to take action on the sustainable urbanisation and to treat this as a matter of urgency. So, turning to what we did in Zambia. So, I think the key thing to mention here is that this is not something that one organisation can solve. It really needs a number of organisations to come together to solve some of these complex challenges. So here we have a number of organisations that were involved. So the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources in Zambia we worked very closely with for the content that we needed to create this new map of Lusaka. So the whole challenge was, how can Lusaka understand where its informal settlements are? How are they growing? How are they densifying? And how can the city therefore target the key resources that are required to sort of mitigate some of that informality? So where are the gaps in sanitation? What are the gaps in health services? So we were very pleased and honoured to work with the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, who provided us with some of that key source imagery data that we needed to create this new map. The Ministry of Local Government Zambia was the key client. They were the organisation that said, look, we understand we have a problem. 70% of our population of Lusaka live informally. We need to be able to target those resources now. We need to be able to understand exactly where we need to put those key resources in the city. We then combined with the International Growth Centre. So the International Growth Centre is an economic policy organisation based out of the London School of Economics. So they brought that power of the policy agenda. They understood the policies, they understood the challenges that were faced by the Ministry of Local Government. And then finally, the Commonwealth Association of Architects were there really understanding the skills gap on the ground. So in many countries across the world, it's not just the spatial data and the evidence and data that's missing, it's also those skills, the planners, the architects and others that are required to help out and develop these challenges. So, the challenge that Ordnance Survey was faced with is, how do we create a new map of Lusaka? How do we create that detailed map showing every single building and starting to bring much more granular geography to the city to help them understand this challenge? So in essence, we took 420 square kilometres of 20 centimetre ortho-rectified imagery, which was kindly supplied by the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. And then we put our automatic machine learning and artificial intelligence machines to work. And what we found is that the machines, in terms of translating the image into real geography and vectors, did it in about 10% of the time it would normally take a manual digitization process. So a map of 420 kilometres square at that sort of scale, typically I would suggest that could take a number of months, with surveyors on the ground, with aircraft and everything else that was needed. This map was created in just a matter of weeks. So what we're seeing here is game-changing technology, not just from Ordnance Survey, but of course lots of other people are doing machine learning and AI-based map creation. But it really is bringing mass mapping at scale to organisations very quickly, much more than ever before. So I won't spend too much time on this slide, because I'm sure you're all aware, but it was very much that classic AI machine learning process, so taking source data from the ortho imagery, creating training data, and then we were able to classify not just the features on the ground, but also to classify the land use. So the map is not just a digital feature map, it's also a land use map. So our machines are able to not just collect features, they're able to classify things like buildings, roads, the difference between hard standing and soft standing ground, water features, to develop that proper land use map as well as a topographic map. So there we go. We started with a 20 centimetre ortho-imagery source from the city of Lusaka, and then we were able to build up our map layers as follows. So we collected, I think it was something like 4,000 kilometres of roads. We collected every single building above 12 metres square, so I think it was about 300,000 buildings that we collected. We collected something like 80 kilometres of trees, and therefore you can see the layers building up nicely there. So what the city now has is a proper, structured, digital base map at very, very good local granularity. And we've created a road links data set there as well, so there's now a transportation layer available to the city. So the final output is a fully structured map with attribution created in just a matter of weeks and then made available to the government of Lusaka in quick time. We also work very closely with the Maron Institute at New York University, who were able to help us with the typology of the residential types. So this, of course, was not just about creating a base map, it was about understanding where the informal settlements were within the city of Lusaka. So this helped us understand exactly where the types of development were in the city. The data is now hosted openly through the ESRI NSDI Data Hub, so that the data is now available to the whole of the government. Other organisations across Lusaka are starting to take advantage of this data. So, for example, you can then start to combine other data to make sense and put the map to work. So you can combine some open data from other sources. The NSDI Hub has a full range of data, including population data that was created by Grid3, and other data sets that were openly available. We're now able to help the city bring those data sets together to make the best decisions about where those gaps in infrastructure are. And indeed, we're now seeing other use cases starting to be put to use. The most notable one is probably from the Zambia Statistics Organisation, who says for the first time they now have property-level data available to them, so they can start to plan the enumeration districts a whole lot better. In the past, it was a bit hit and miss. They would just divvy up the land geographically. Some census enumerators were overloaded because they didn't know how many properties they had to collect data from, and others were underloaded. Now, with proper granular data at the property level, enumeration can be balanced across the enumeration and the collection of that data. They also have a great understanding of physical boundaries that may hinder that collection, such as busy roads and water features, so good from a central planning perspective, that data. So again, just the final output. I think the key, just to finish off, just a little bit about Ordnance Survey. So with the British Government's National Mapping Agency, been around for about 230 years. What we do is we combine decades of experience and learning, and we bring together that with the state-of-the-art technologies and innovation that's available today to present the best end-to-end national mapping process. And then we work with countries across the world in helping other national mapping agencies really bridge that gap between the policy outcomes their governments might have and becoming that geospatial enabling organisation that needs to pretty move from the outside of their governments into the centre of their governments to ensure that that data is fit for purpose and it can deliver those policy outcomes that those countries are requiring. And finally, a freebie for you all. So if you go onto that website, we have a free report that we've created. It's a sustainable urbanization report, about 45 pages of case studies from around the world, showing social economic use cases where geospatial data has really helped with the challenge of sustainable urbanization. At that point, I can see that everybody is desperate for a cup of coffee, but I am happy to take any questions if you're happy to stay behind. Thank you very much.
Indeed, questions?
Sorry, everyone. OpenStreetMap, certainly in the environments we work in, often that's a really useful base source. How do you find, what's your relationship with OpenStreetMap, and are they sort of competitor to you? How does that work?
I think that's a good question, Tim. Thank you. OpenStreetMap, I think, are a really good collaborator. I think a lot of the information in Zambia actually there's a good OpenStreetMap coverage in Zambia. So I think it's a case of if we can bring together the work that we do together with organisations such as OpenStreetMap and others, it just helps build that bigger picture. I think, from my perspective, if you can bring together any data to help make the best decisions, that's a good thing. Whether it's from open data, indeed, whether it's from crowdsourced data, I think what we need to do is encourage more citizen-sourced data, because that, again, is an absolutely critical input to some of these challenges. So for me, it's just about bringing together different sources and presenting the best possible evidence base you can through those sources.
Another question, sorry. In our work in Africa, the key problem is that we'll get lots of data sets in from different authorities. They won't be interoperable, and we'll have to do some huge data triage, which holds back the work when we're doing energy or transport master planning out there. Have you been able to put in place some data standards for Lusaka that will allow things like unique IDs to be used, linked into other data sets, all that training provided for them to carry on as a legacy?
Great question. I mean, exactly. I mean, that's our next step, really, is working with the NSDI policy in Zambia, because you're absolutely right. What you find is you get silos of data that's not interoperable. So the next stage is, yes, we intend to work with the government of Zambia to actually accelerate that NSDI policy to ensure the correct standards are in place and that we can start to break down some of those silos and ensure that there's one single authoritative hub of information that everyone can use for their policy agendas.
I have a lot more, but I'll just ask one right now. Talk to you later. Are there plans by the government and the Ministry of Lands to look at formalization for the informal settlements, having some kind of formalization process around tenure?
Yes, I think obviously the land administration challenge in Zambia is equally a huge issue for them, as I'm sure you know. They are now looking at how this sort of granularity of mapping can help with that whole process. And I think at the moment the collection of cadastral information is quite sporadic, as I understand it. It's very localised, it's driven by local needs, it's typically drone captured, localised survey. So I think now there's an indication of trying to take this foundational map and use that as a foundation for a new land administration process going forward.
Then I would like to take the opportunity to thank Andy, thank all the speakers, and thank you all for participating. I think this was a very interesting. Thank you very much.